Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our June webinar. We'll be talking about reframing the value proposition for retrofitting existing buildings. What's working? Where does language come in? Organizational factors, just the human side of all these projects is so key to what's really possible to get done. Setting aside, what's technically possible, what is it actually realistic to get done? How do we need to be communicating to get that done, to achieve the goal that I think we all have of getting more projects done, saving energy, saving water. Little housekeeping as usual, the webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our website. There will be a follow-up email with some key takeaways along with the slides and a link to the recording. As usual, lines will be muted just to keep things orderly, but we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. Comments are welcome as well. And to submit those, please just type them into the questions box. You should see a drop down on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar Navigator screen where you can do that. My name is Dave Hodgins. I run the LA Better Buildings Challenge. Just a little bit about us. We are part of the Mayor's Sustainable City Plan, specifically the section on existing buildings, obviously. Continuing to grow the program towards the goal of 20% energy and water savings by 2020. There are opportunities for recognition through our annual awards, case studies that we'll collaborate on with DOE and yourselves, tailor those to the audience that you want them to work for, whether that's tenants, other external stakeholders like investors, etc. And we offer a range of services. I won't go a lot into this, but everything from technical assistance around benchmarking, which is obviously a big topic now, and I'm sure there's lots of questions on that. We have an update coming out tomorrow on the status of all of that. But about projects, and that's really the theme of today's webinar, is how can we have a more productive conversation about projects? Real quickly, 1, 2, 3, how you get involved. And again, we want all the high performance buildings in LA to take the challenge. It's no extra work, but it does get you access to some free resources, again, opportunities for recognition, and kind of a hotline for all things energy and water. So I'm going to start with maybe a controversial statement, but in my experience, my career, savings don't sell projects. That is sort of a hard truth, and I think a lot of us in this industry think, well, of course, this project is going to save so much energy, so much water, this makes all the sense in the world, so much money. Why aren't more of these projects happening? This just makes so much sense. Well, the reality is that savings are hard to project. We all understand that there are measurement and verification protocols that are internationally accepted. You can get into enhanced metering. You can measure the savings, right? You can develop a baseline and measure the before and after, but that is quickly becomes a rabbit hole, and you can lose people who maybe aren't as familiar with this. Savings are hard to measure, I already said. And then the question, a big one, is who actually gets the savings? When we're talking about commercial properties, especially multi-tenant properties, lease structure becomes a huge issue. And if we come into a conversation saying, look at all these savings, and the answer is, well, really, it's a lot more complicated than that. We've got tenants with full service gross leases, some with a base year plus an escalation, some triple net tenants, it's all mixed up. The answer is not so simple. And again, we lose people when we come at this and don't understand that fact. So it's very important who gets the savings, and this is an amorphous thing. So savings don't sell projects. Savings can be a very slippery slope. And but good news is there are other ways to frame this where we're talking about something that is more immediate, more tangible. And also, folks aren't motivated by savings, especially, and this is geared, it's talking about commercial property owners. Commercial property owners, commercial property managers are motivated by making money, not by saving money. They're not in the business of saving money, they're in the business of making money. So, of course, controlling expenses is important, controlling costs is important, but it's about leasing, it's about revenues per square foot if it's a retail If it's a retail customer, it's about revenue per available room. If it's a hospitality customer, it's how do I make money? And we are more successful, we in the energy and water conservation, sustainability, efficiency business, if we recognize that fact and tailor our proposals accordingly. So I'm going to talk about today some thoughts about ways that we can try to understand the customer and some of those key trigger points that are going to resonate with them, how language is important, and really reframing the value proposition from, wow, this is going to save so much energy, so much water, so much money, to here's how this is going to enhance the performance of your building in line with your strategy for making money. That's the thing. How do we tie these projects to making money? And I should say that, back up, this is a presentation that I gave at the AEE West Coast Conference a couple weeks ago in Long Beach. So it is geared more towards engineers, contractors, and facilities engineers, I'll say too, who are generally the ones trying to pitch these types of projects. So I want to start with just a little bit of background on a typical org chart for a commercial real estate investment company. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I do want to point out the source at the bottom and thank them as one of our wonderful partners, the Institute for Real Estate Management, IREM. And they're really, in my opinion, one of the leading industry education organizations for commercial real estate. So this is borrowed from some slides, a webinar they did with us last spring. And I think it's illustrative of the point I'm making here. So we've got obviously CEO at the top, and we've got 4 different columns here, HR, its own column, accounting on the right, and then basically the 2 more relevant columns are the 2 on the left that you see, VP of Construction, TI Coordinator, and then Vice President, all the way down to the building manager. So oftentimes, when we're talking about an efficiency project, we're starting at the bottom here with the building manager, working up to the asset manager, working up to the regional AM, and I'll talk more about these roles on the next few slides. But this is a basic org chart, and this is what IREM teaches folks that they are educating in the commercial real estate industry. So the asset manager, excuse me, is responsible for making money, basically. Coordination, oversight of leasing, construction, property management is making money. Controlling expenses, but driving revenue. Tenant retention, budget management. Budget includes a lot of other things aside from utility expenses. We have to keep that in mind. And you can increase NOI lots of ways. Energy and water efficiency is one of them. And how can we tie that to what their objectives are in terms of making money? And they're looking across multiple properties, I should say. The asset manager generally has responsibility for a portfolio of properties, not just a single building. Property manager is a person that we often deal with eventually, and they're responsible for day-to-day operations, keeping tenants happy, dealing with those hot and cold calls, all of the aspects of lease enforcement, which again is much broader than that, and finding ways to increase NOI by essentially keeping everyone happy who's in that building on a day-to-day basis. And by the way, they're the one who needs to pitch the asset manager on any of these projects to say, can we get some budget for this, please? And then that goes all the way up the chart here. So then you've got the construction manager, oversight of third-party construction. A lot of that is tenant improvements, also any other capital projects that may be happening. And they're working with the property and asset managers on these types of physical improvements. So this guy or gal is very important in this. They also are very busy looking at multiple buildings. So going back up in the org chart here again, they are on this left column looking across a portfolio, generally speaking, and responsible for tenant improvements and capital projects. They need to buy off on the constructability of the project, work with the property manager to understand what can we touch, what will the leases allow us to do, what's going on in terms of lease expirations, new tenants coming in, where can we be in the building, and then with the asset manager on, okay, what's it going to cost us? What are the benefits going to be? Energy and water savings is one of those. What are the other benefits, and how do we tie those together? That's what I'm going to come back to. Then leasing agent, key. They're the one who's actually responsible for new leases, determining or negotiating the rents, negotiating tenant improvements, which is a huge portion of energy that's used in a building, as you all know. What money is there available for that? How is that going to be spent? And they got their ear to the ground. What is market? What can we reasonably negotiate to try to, again, make money? Spend as little as possible, make as much as possible. So who's missing in all of this? We looked at this whole org chart, and again, this is coming from IREM, who is really one of the leading education institutions for commercial real estate professionals. Who's missing here? This guy, the facilities engineer, not even in the org chart. So this is not meant to be pejorative or anything, but this is the reality we're dealing with, and so we need to adjust our messaging, adjust our language to help him or her be effective and make it all the way up that org chart to get the funds to do the projects that we want to do. So what is the decision process? It's not based off of savings, as I've said. It's based off of increased revenues. It's how do we make money, and how can we talk about efficiency projects in a way that they make money. And the good news is that they do. The data shows, and this is from a database called CoStar, which is really what everybody uses for analyzing what's going on in the commercial real estate market. This is what the leasing agents look at when they're trying to figure out that question, what's market? So the data shows, and we have, I'll get into some time series data here, that high performance buildings, we'll say that Energy Star and LEED buildings are high performance buildings, outperform the market relative to non-certified buildings. And yes, there are a number of factors that go into what makes a high performance building more valuable. Generally, high performance buildings are just better managed in general. Enhanced energy performance or great, broader sustainability around waste management, just an indication of the kind of the quality of management. But anyway, we can look at some of these numbers, and I'll get it to some takeaways that are a little bit less obvious. I think this is intuitive and everybody's heard this. So this is looking at Class A buildings in LA. I won't read it all. Then, oh, sorry, this was 2014 data that was being blocked by my thing here. Over time, these numbers have changed. This is today. This is as of, March 2017. So here's July 2014, basically 3 years later. So see this difference. These are some pretty dramatic increases in terms of rent per square foot and sales price per square foot. So rent per square foot has actually decreased, but sales price per square foot, I think these are reversed, has increased. So what we see then over time is that the vacancy has actually decreased over this time period. Pardon me, I think there's an error with this slide. So how can we relate energy performance to value? And these are some reports that we can pretty quickly create. And if anyone's interested to follow up about this on projects that you may be developing, we can utilize CoStar, that same database, and ask with a few questions answered about what's the building's current asking rent, current Energy Star score, and current occupancy. Then we can compare that against a competitive set of similar buildings in LA and that are Energy Star, and we can see what those averages are. Logic being, if you can trend towards, if you can improve your performance to the point where you could get Energy Star certified, then the numbers should trend towards what the data says Energy Star buildings are commanding, right? The Energy Star buildings have a higher lease rate and higher occupancy. Therefore, if I get Energy Star, and I'm not today, my number should go up. So what we're showing here is if you're able to, and we can change all of these assumptions, save 20%, 30%, or 40% energy, that would be a deep project. Your starting Energy Star score is 65. We'll use the 20% example. If you could save 20%, your score would go from a 65 up to a 76. That means that you could actually get certified. So the data says that over time, your occupancy should increase towards the average for Energy Star buildings in a similar location. And we don't have to predict exactly what that is because, again, that's a slippery slope trying to say, if I do this, then exactly this will happen. But is it 5%? Is it 7%? Is it 9%? Trending towards what we see the average here is 90%. So let's call it 5. That's in this building, 10,000 square feet of additional leased space, occupancy increase of 5%. That's our low assumption here. What does that mean? Let's say rent stays the same. That means if you increase your occupancy and keep that same rent, here's what your gross annual rent went up by. So this is assigning no value whatsoever to the savings, but to say data shows us that Energy Star certified buildings do tend to be better occupied. So let's say the rent doesn't go up at all. Take that argument off the table. Let's say there's no savings. If you do these projects and can save 20%, then your gross annual rent increase would look about like $240,000 a year. Different way of looking at the project and thinking about how do these projects make money and getting away from the slippery slope of there's going to be so much energy savings, it's going to be amazing. Same or similar argument for rents. So here, we've asked what's the current asking rent. We can also pull this from CoStar. The average rent for Energy Star certified buildings in the same area, same competitive set, is a little bit higher, well, significantly higher, 15 cents per foot higher. So same logic applies. If you could save 20%, that would get you certified. Starting from a 65, you get a 76, you get certified. So your rent should trend up from this $2 for a non-certified building up to the $2.15 because I'm certified now. Same analysis, low, medium, high. This kind of sensitivity analysis is a good thing to do. You can do some of the illustrative, what if analysis as part of your proposal. Let's say it doesn't go up the full 15 cents. It only goes up 10 cents a foot. What's that worth? And we're assigning no value to the occupancy increase, but we just went through that example. It should happen over time. What's that worth? If it only goes up 10 cents, that's another $214,000 a year in gross annual rent increase. That's per year. So we've got making money through a rent increase over time that's supported by data, or making money through occupancy increase over time that's supported by data. So it's a different way of looking at it, and we're not talking about savings at all. So the key thing is to understand the owner's priorities and strategy, because they have very little time for this, first of all, very busy. The people who need to be convinced of this have responsibility for multiple buildings and they don't speak kilowatt hours. So we need to put these proposals into terms that make sense for them, where they can follow the logic, and where it's simple to understand and say yes to. So we need to understand where they're coming from, though, in order to do that. So it's important to understand what's their hold period. How much time do we have before they're planning to sell this building? What is the story? Are they planning to hold it for a very long time? Are they planning to refinance it next year and want to hold off on doing any improvements? Or do they have enough time where they want to try to get some projects done, show some seasoning on those savings, and then get a multiplier on that value? How much time do we have? If I'm recommending projects that are going to take longer to develop and implement than the owner's time horizon, first of all, they're obviously not going to get done. But if you have other shorter payback things that could make sense, it generally all gets thrown out, or in best case, broken up. What projects are planned? End-of-life equipment replacement, other kinds of things. Are they looking to improve tenant comfort? Are they looking to maybe run fiber, improve the IT infrastructure in the building? Where are the types of planned projects where we can bolt on, undercover efficiency upgrades, projects that will improve the operation of the building, but also happen to save energy and/or water? And getting away again from this whole savings idea, is making the building better, making it work better so that it makes more money. Understanding too, this kind of ties to trying to understand just the realities of what is possible to get done in the building. How much time do we have? What is already happening? Where's their momentum? Because people only have so much brain space to deal with this kind of stuff. So is there something you're already doing where I can just kind of tweak it and get some performance out? And then what can we actually touch? What are the leases going to allow or prevent us from touching? Do we have a large chunk of vacancy about to come up? Is a big tenant moving out? And that means that all of a sudden we have space to stage a bunch of equipment and actually do some improvements to that floor. Or do we not? Do we need to work in a fully occupied building and really be a light touch? Are we going to have to work in off hours? Recommending projects that make sense given what's going on in that building from a leasing and tenancy perspective. And then also, what types of tenants does the owner currently have, or what types of tenants do they want? I try to attend lots of real estate industry events to understand this, and everyone's after tech, creative, entertainment, those types of tenants, data centers. These types of tenants use lots of energy. They require lots of energy, lots of computing power. Those systems cannot go down. And in fact, they're looking to increase their usage, but that means lots of cooling. So that cooling needs to be done really efficiently. And if we're trying to keep the overall building looking good, say I'm part of GRESB or the Dow Sustainability Index, then we need to make the rest of the building systems more and more efficient if that's the kind of tenants I want to bring in, because by the way, these tenants also care about that. Are we running fiber? Does that mean that we have some BAS capabilities now that we didn't have before? And then last but definitely not least, lease type and lease rates. Who is going to get the savings? If I make all these improvements, is it all going to go to tenants? Is it going to get split out all kinds of crazy ways? Is it worth it to even try to do that brain damage? Or did the leases allow me to claw back capital investments that I can show are going to save money for my tenants? So to ask those questions up front and help frame what is it that I'm proposing, in what order, in what parts of the building, and what are the benefits? How does this tie in with the overall strategy, projects that are planned, and ultimately how is this going to help make money, keep and retain, attract tenants or guests or customers, whatever that metric is that the owner cares about. And then only at the end we can look, working backwards, if we know the annual utility spend, can assume a cap rate and say, okay, if in fact you were able to cut energy use, in this case 20% works out to about 100 grand, then you can actually work into, okay, what does it make sense to spend given my discount rate? We can adjust this to achieve that savings, to achieve that kind of annual savings. And so this is, again, just a thought exercise to kind of connect the synapses to say that there's value here. There's increases in rent and occupancy, setting savings aside completely. And all of this fits within the strategy, so it makes sense to do it. So this is the last slide. Just I'm going very quickly, I realize, and hopefully there will be some questions or time for discussion. But then how do you present all of this? I'm talking about a lot about how to relate performance to value, but how do you present all of this to someone who's very busy and doesn't have a lot of time to get into all the technical details, not their area of expertise or interest generally, to get way in the weeds on that? So everyone has probably seen this. You present this proposal, you've spent months on it, and they just flip to the table. Where's the table? What's it going to cost? What's it going to save? So in the table is where you can address some of these things. It needs to be feasible. The projects need to be feasible within the time and accessibility constraints, like I was saying. Note that in the table, ease of implementation, time of implementation, where in the building, I'll just say lighting retrofit. Lighting retrofit of 4 floors coming vacant in June 2018, and more specific. It is important to have analysis of the savings as backup, and that be transparent with the kinds of sensitivity analysis or best case, worst case. If I'm off by this much, either direction, what does that mean? It's important to have that, but again, the benefits or the drivers for projects are often beyond the savings. It's about improving tenant experience. Maybe I need to be able to provide after hours air conditioning for a very important tenant, and if I don't do certain projects, I'm not going to be able to do that without turning on air conditioning for the whole building. Things like that can be a big driver. Indoor environmental quality, just avoiding maintenance issues, predictive maintenance, reliability. Today's tenants that want that kind of computing power, stability, redundancy, these are all big drivers for projects that essentially keep expenses flat or declining while we're trying to add usage. Third-party certifications can be important. So these types of things can be pointed out in the table. So you're not just looking at, well, that's a 5-year payback. That's not going to work. Well, it's a 5-year payback, but it will improve the reliability of your system, of your systems, and relate to tenant comfort and reduce maintenance complaints. You don't necessarily have to quantify those things. They can be hard to quantify, but the owner sure knows, the property manager sure knows the value of these other types of benefits, and it is somewhat subjective, but the answer is not zero. So that 5-year payback without that type of context doesn't look that attractive. If you frame it in the context of the owner's priorities and strategy, it can be a different story. So that's all to say that these projects can make money. It's not just about savings. If we think about all the benefits and the ways that improved performance relates to value, the drivers of value for your client, these projects do fit into that strategy if we can present them that way. So with that, I will take any questions. Okay. Feel free to type in any questions to the bar on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, well, I guess that must have been an excellent presentation. I'm not seeing any questions, so I want to thank everybody for joining, and the recording will be posted. Again, we'll be sharing the slides, and a follow-up email will be sent around. So thank you all for joining this afternoon, and look out for our next webinar coming up. I believe it's July 24th, but the dates will be in the follow-up email. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.